hands. Imagine the entire state of Ohio forced to pack up and leave their homes within the span of 5 years. Now apply that image to nearly 13 million Syrian refugees forced to flee their homes since the Syrian civil war began in 2011. Half of these refugees are children. Both governmental and international groups are struggling to meet their resource needs due to a lack of critical resources. There is a mounting global health crisis, as well as a strain on the economy and the infrastructure of neighboring countries, as well as Europe. Naturally, there has been a massive pushback against refugees, particularly from conservative politicians. However, there are solutions to this problem. Some of these solutions include donating to aid groups, which can provide valuable resources to the refugees, as well as encouraging countries to share the burden of the refugee crisis. The US government is second only to Turkey in the funds given to this crisis. Therefore, we are directly affected by our country's policies. I believe it is incredibly important for every US citizen to be informed on these issues, because additionally, the world's economy affects the US economy. If we are to know how our own domestic policies and economy affects us, we need to know what's going on in the world around us. As a political science student, I feel incredibly passionate about global issues, and I pride myself on maintaining an informed mindset about these problems. I would like to discuss the following 5 facets of Syrian refugee crisis to provide a fuller picture for you. First, the scope and the direction of the Syrian refugee crisis. Next, it will be shown how the resources, or lack thereof, are creating a mounting global health crisis, especially in the stability of host countries. Naturally, this will be followed by the massive pushback of conservative politicians in accepting refugees in their home countries. Next, we will talk about the long-term consequences of this crisis in Syrian youth. Last, we will talk about the solutions for this problem and how we can reduce the suffering of these people. To begin, we will look at the sheer size of the refugee crisis. It would take 233 Yankee stadiums to sit each and every Syrian refugee. There are 13 million in total, with 6 million being externally displaced and another 6 million still internally displaced inside the country. Half of all of them are children, and most refugees decide to settle in areas around them. According to Mercy Corps, an international aid group, there is a high chance of these refugees dying from exposure, illness, or drowning in their attempts to cross into these neighboring countries. Many walk over 1,400 miles to get to Europe. That's the distance from New York to Houston. Many of them are families with young children, and a large portion of them do not make it. According to worldvision.org, large numbers of these Syrians are unable to escape the violence and are still inside the country. For many of these people, it is preferable for them to attempt to leave the country than to stay trapped by either Assad's blockades or boxed in by the war zones inside their country. Syrians have overwhelmed the capacity of these bordering states to provide for the influx. Jordan, for example, has closed off its borders because it can no longer provide for the massive amount of people. Turkey has faced riots inside of its country from refugees unable to live in the poor conditions of its camps. This is according to the article, What You Need to Know About the Syrian Refugee Crisis. Lastly, Lebanon has more Syrian refugees living within its borders than Lebanese people. All 3 of these countries are struggling to meet the demands while maintaining a humanitarian policy. Such a large number has taken a toll on the resources available to a desperate population. The massive amount of people has created a disparity of an estimated $7.7 billion worth of current and required critical resources, according to mercycorp.org. Consequently, global health and the economy have taken major hits. Refugee health has suffered from a lack of hygiene, poor resources, and poor living communities. Diseases such as polio and tuberculosis spread rapidly through tightly grouped people. Camps are often well above their recommended capacity. Some of the largest vaccination campaigns in history have taken place inside these camps, however. For example, according to Syrian Refugee.eu, 32 million children in and around Syria have been vaccinated. The logistics of taking in these people are challenged by limited funds and space, as well as host countries being unable to predict the amount of people they received due to the unpredictability of the violence inside of Syria. These issues have created a major pushback against taking in refugees in almost every country. Several right-wing politicians have campaigned for strict to no entry for these groups of people. This is due to their fear of refugees taking jobs, as well as the fear of radical ideology. Losing jobs to mass immigration has been a fear for a long time. However, according to World Vision, the economy actually does better when Syrians are given a chance to obtain their own salary instead of taking refugee aid money. Additionally, this crisis of refugees and the issue of them taking other people's jobs has created a lot of paranoia in other countries. It is one of the main reasons that the Brexit vote occurred. ISIS's involvement in the fighting inside of Syria has created a negative stereotype for Syrians, even though many of them are peaceful. As of June of 2014, ISIS declared a caliphate over Syria and its surrounding area. According to Syrian Refugees.eu, many people believe that it's too dangerous to try to tell the difference between peaceful and non-peaceful people. 32 US governments inside of states have declared that they will not take Syrian refugees, although the Constitution claims this is unconstitutional. While people fear the section of Syrians who are harmful towards Western countries, the vast majority will suffer the consequences of the civil war for generations. The country of Syria has regressed to its pre-modern age and no longer has working methods of sanitation, transportation, or sewage. As well, its central government does not have any regulation over weights or measures, and its economy is in shambles. Its youth has taken a 5-year gap in its education and will not make nearly as much money or have a high quality of life as its parents or its grandparents did. Finally, with the situation so grave, there can be no catch-all solution. However, we can do some things. For instance, pushing for countries to take refugees. Every country needs to take its fair share, according to the EU. When every country takes its fair share, no country has too many. For example, Germany has suffered internally for taking more refugees than any other country combined within Europe. Giving to charities helps delegate resources more effectively as well. For example, giving to worldvision.org can give refugee families enough resources to feed its entire family for the year while it's traveling. This is according to its website, worldvision.org. In conclusion, the Syrian refugee crisis is multifaceted and has created a multitude of other issues in addition to the traveling migrants. It has created an economic, educational depression and will have lasting impact for decades to come. Syrian refugees have reached into the millions, and they have settled within neighboring countries as well as Europe, and everyone should be doing its part to help control this crisis. These issues don't just affect those living in camps or within Syria. The world's issues belong to the US as well, especially in this globalized age. There are 13 million Syrian citizens currently living in crisis. Whether they are traveling long distance by foot or trapped in Syria, or scrapping a living in deplorable camp conditions, their struggle should not go unaided by the countries of the world. Syrian citizens deserve, at the very least, the world's awareness of this crisis. Thank you. Yeah.